it's time for questions. So who'd like to start? Who'd like to start? Perhaps the table right at the end there would like to start. No? No? Here we go. Okay, Rena. Rena's got a question. Let me.
We are asking the difference between irritation and anger.
Difference between irritation.
Irritation and anger, yeah.
Let's hear all of the questions if we can. So let's have all the tables, and then I can try and group the answers.
Our table is asking, what is hope? And the second.
What is hope? Yeah.
Love and hope as concepts, do they go together?
Thank you.
Why is it that posts on social media is so easily misconstrued and used negatively?
Just say the last part again. They posts on social media misconstrue and
Use
okay.
negatively. Sorry. Here. Right. Hello.
And our second question is, how do we prevent negativity spilling into our daily lives before
Wow.
the day has even started?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Our question is, if God is the mind of the universe, why is the universe in such a disarray?
Wow.
Okay, our question is, in the light of women and abuse of women and children, especially sexual abuse of children, as Christians, we are meant to forgive. Especially when it's close to home, how do you do that?
Wow.
And then a follow-up question, stepping a little bit back from that, as a wider Christian community, how do we help? How do we make a difference?
Okay, so our table asks, what can we do as a community of Christians to bring about change in our country? Because alone we feel so impotent.
So our question was, in the light of keeping hope, how do you implement it? Like, rather than just saying, "Oh, we'll pray for you" or something like that. Some practical ways as a Christian to help direct somebody with hope.
This question is not specifically related to the talk, but it's does God exist and why? And is that an individual relationship or is it an overarching relationship?
Has everybody asked their questions? Right, over to you, John.
Thank you. Oh. Okay.
I would like to know if do we give God a free pass? We attribute all the bad things that happen to free will or the devil, and all the good things to God. Are we giving God a free pass?
Okay. Let me. Sure. Thank you. So, thank you. When I was hearing the hub around the tables, I thought it was. I wanted to be quick with the question so that you could return to some of the conversation around the table, but hearing that list and knowing my track record with answering questions. But let's see how it goes. So I think kind of let's, yeah, so obviously I'm not going to be able to give comprehensive answers, partly because I'm having to do it, in the moment, but also because I think I'll feel moved to give a specific angle, and hopefully the angle is right in the moment. But let's just maybe pick up with the what is hope question, and that might be a good place to start. And because it is very important to understand, I really find the difference between optimism and hope. And if one understands the difference between optimism and hope, one has discovered what hope is. And when one's seeing the difference between optimism and hope, optimism is about, how you assess your circumstances and you say, I think this is going to go well, end well. Then you're optimistic about the outcome. If you assess the circumstances and you say this is going to end badly, then you're pessimistic about the outcome. But in both cases, interestingly, you can have hope. To some extent, and it depends on time frames, you can be a pessimist but have hope. So you could look at a situation and say, for the next 5 to 10 years, this is really going to go badly. But I have a role in this season. I have a purpose in this season. I have a meaning in this season. And when you're able to say that, when you're able to be in touch with your purpose, your meaning, then you're able to have hope. So, of course, we learn a lot from Viktor Frankl's book that he wrote, reflecting on his experience in Auschwitz, where he survived, and he noticed, he was a psychiatrist already when he went in, but it changed his whole outlook. But he noticed those who had a purpose to their lives were the ones that survived, given the circumstances. At our table, there was a lovely story Alan shared about his dad, who, I hope you don't mind me saying it from the front, but to some extent it was similar. He was a prisoner of war in the Second World War, throughout the war, and moved around a lot. But in the prison camps, they were allowed, and he was part of the team that put on plays, like Gilbert and Sullivan plays. And they managed to make costumes and all of that. And that gave them purpose. In the midst of being a prisoner of war, in immense cruelty, and your life might be hanging on a thread, and so on. But you see how things can really be bad, but you can still have hope. And it's not so much about you've got, it's not about the wealth, it's about what is the meaning of one's life. And I think that we can help people discover. Can I go next to, let me just decide. So let me go to the questions around if God is the mind of the universe, why is it in so much disarray? I want to tie that one up with the question, does God get a free pass on the bad things? If I understand that, God gets credit for the good things, but does he just, does one overlook the fact that many bad things are happening? How do you just say the good's coming from God? Isn't God the source of all things? Is sort of how that question's going. And then there was one question that came in online before tonight, in prep for tonight, and it links with this. The person asked, why does God allow such terrible abuse of children if he has all the power? So what one's dealing with there, and what one's got to think one's way through, is what is one's picture of God, and who is God, and what is the nature of God's power. If I had to stay with this question that had come in online, why does God allow such terrible abuse of children if he has all the power? Perhaps it's helpful to just think of it, a parent, and let's say it's their late teenage or adult children. Can you say to the parent, of adult children who are not even living at home, who've done something stupid and destructive and hurt themselves, hurt others, can you say to the parent, why did you allow that? Now we know in a way we can't, because that parent has had to let their child go, and that child has had to, has expressed their freedom in a way that's destructive. But we also know in that kind of scenario that the parent feels deeply in their heart the pain that their child is going through, the pain the child has caused others. And I think that's an insight into God. God has given us freedom, and our freedom is very real. We are, God being the source of creation is not the same as saying God's in control of everything. So one's got to see the difference. In the same way as a parent is the source of the child, but the child has freedom. But the heart of the parent is with the suffering that the child is going through and has caused. And God's heart really feels the suffering of the world. Really, really feels the suffering of the world. And so you might want to say, well, why doesn't God just force us to do the right thing? And then we need to remind ourselves, what is the nature of God's power? The nature of God's power is love. And love is never dominating. Love is never doesn't force itself on others, isn't coercive. Love seeks to attract one to the good. Love seeks to be persuasive. And that's God's power, is persuasive power, not coercive power. God is all the time. There is never a moment that God is not drawing us, luring us, attracting us, persuading us about the good, the beautiful, the true, the loving. But we have real freedom, and we make the choices. And when we embrace the good, there is a real way in which this is God at work, because it's God who's given us those good possibilities, and God's Spirit who's been at work within us to see the good, recognize the good, embrace the good. So, and then of course one needs to appreciate that, you know, our freedom and the way in which we've abused that freedom is, there's also networks of cooperation around that. So evil has a life of its own in this world in many ways through the systems we've created that perpetuate a lot of the destruction. So I really think that's important, and we are never separated from God's presence. So it's not as if the picture we mustn't have in our minds is that God turned God's back on us for a moment and then let the car go through the intersection and T-bone us because, you know, perhaps we hadn't been doing our devotions well lately and we needed to be taught a lesson, you know. People do talk like that. You know, we mustn't have this picture that God decides to sometimes be in a moment and sometimes decides not to be in a moment. God is with us in every moment. And sometimes, you know, if one can be aware of it, perhaps, you know, it's just the experience of God's presence, but yet the cancer might still take over, you know, the bad thing might still happen. So that's really important. That's really important. So the big challenge there around the picture of God is the idea of God in control. It's a really problematic idea to think of God as in control. Because if God is in control, then God does have to take responsibility for the evil in the world. And then, you know, that's not really a God worth worshipping. Yeah, let me stop there. Then can I go to the question, does God exist and why? And then it was about the relationship. So that is a big question, and it's a lovely question, especially for this evening where one's discussing life's big questions. I mean, I want to say that, I mean, we've been here, creation has been here a long time, you know, 13.8 billion years, something like that. And that's a long time, but it still had a beginning. And that, you know, that beginning, which was, you know, at first 13.8 billion years ago, there was no organic life. You know, that comes so much later. But yet, you know, the settling of the cosmos, and for us here, the settling of the solar system, and the, you know, and then the things that make life on the earth possible, and you know, then just, you know, single cell, and even things before the single cell organisms, and then the single cell organisms form colonies, and a billion years later they've pushed enough oxygen into the atmosphere that the next step can take place. And you just can, you know, and you go, there's these steps that there's been this will to life, and this source, this vital impetus that has brought us to where we are. And I mean, from where we are now, in terms of the diversity, the complexity of life on this planet, is absolutely incredible, especially if you think of its source. And that couldn't have happened by chance. It is impossible for it to have happened by chance. So there does seem to be this behind it all. And mind isn't the perfect analogy, but it really is helpful in this context. So for me, that's a definite sign of the reality of God. And of course, that is the reality of God. That's, one's not talking religion then and, whose view of God. It's the reality of God. And nobody fully understands the reality of God. We certainly are convinced that we don't have the full understanding, but we've got something really precious in especially the revelation of God in Jesus. And then if I understood the second part, and maybe just clarify, is the second part around relating to God, is it an individual relationship or an overarching relationship? So is that a question around saying, does God have relationship with us as individuals, or is God's relationship with the world a general one, and going to the individual space isn't really appropriate? Is that, just say it? Okay. Yeah, I would say it's both. I mean, yeah, how would I want to try and explain it as both? Because, I mean, when I mean, certainly from our experience, we sense God dealing with us individually, but we also sense God dealing with us when we don't even know God's dealing with us, and dealing with us organically and as a species and as a planet. And so also when you think of the interconnections of the planet, and how everything is interconnected, that's an overarching system that's at work, not with individuals, but systemically. And that, is also certainly a way God is at work. Yeah. There's a lot more that one could say, but it's a great question just in terms of trying to get a feel. And I think the big realization is, God is completely immersed in both the system and the potential of relationships with each one of us. And that's where, for us as humans, we have the unique privilege of our consciousness that can be conscious of God and have a conscious relationship, which, as one goes down complexity, gets less and less. It's not that a dolphin doesn't have a relationship with God, but it's not quite as conscious as ours is. And so God's, involved all the way down, right? Amoeba below, and so on. But, yeah, let me stop there. Can I just touch on just some of the questions around how do we implement hope? How do we make it practical? And then the question around what do we as Christians do to bring change because we're feeling impotent? And that might touch on one or two of the other questions as well. I think, for Jesus, his driving force, his energy center was compassion. He really, you could see, felt the pain of people and responded from that center. So if we are to awaken to what it means for us to be agents of hope and make a difference, we need to seek to grow our compassion and to pray for that. And of course, it's like a muscle that the more you practice, the more you, the more it becomes part of your life. That's the one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is, in terms of this, and particularly in a faith context, we need to see that being Christian means being a follower of Jesus and being an agent of his kingdom. And when that light comes on for us, then we'll look for ways, then we will naturally looking for ways to be agents of hope. The problem is when one's idea of Christianity is that, I believe in Jesus, it's a personal thing, he's forgiven my sins, I'm going to heaven one day. That's, there's that saying, so heavenly focused, earthly good. What I'm getting at is there isn't, in that kind of narrow, just vertical relationship with God view, it's not impacting one's life. And one does have to make the mind shift to how Jesus presented reality and the relationship with God. And then I'll just end with, I'm not going to necessarily get to all of them. I think some of what I've said will be implied in how does one's, at the beginning of one's day, how does one make sure that the day doesn't start with the negativity spreading. Certainly in one's connection with God, one's devotional start to the day, starting the day in Scripture, that helps enormously. Okay. I've ticked most of the boxes. And I think let me leave it there. I hope that was okay. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions. That was very, very rich, and those were discussing life's big questions. Thank you so much.
Friends, I think we should end our evening with a word of thanks to a number of people. First of all, we want to thank the team that planned tonight. And I think that's Liesel and Denise and Ingrid, and in the background, Kira, the office staff. Who else? Lorraine. Yes. Won't you just stand? Denise, I did say Denise. Won't you just stand? So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so very much. Yes, wonderful. What are we going to do without these sort of folk in the church? I mean, the church would just grind to a halt. That's for sure. And then we want to thank the facilitators. Would the facilitators please all stand? Let's thank them. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much for facilitating your tables. That's absolutely wonderful. And then we want to thank Farina's. We want to thank Nick and Tracy and the staff and the waitrons, the pizza makers, the salad makers, and what are those little things? Little bowls of things. What are those? Condiments, the condiment makers. The servers of cool drinks and wines and beers and things. Thank you so very much. Farina, let's give a round of applause to them. And then very often we forget about the people on the sound, and there's Warren over there in the corner Thank you so very much. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And then a big round of applause to yourselves for coming tonight, all the attendees. Wonderful that you came. And then we need to thank John for tonight. I know he doesn't like the limelight. He doesn't like to be thanked. But John, we want to thank you for your the preparation for this talk. I mean, behind that, there's a lot of preparation and a lot of prayer. We want to thank you for your presentation. Fabulous. And my goodness me, somebody said as I came and sat down, they said, you've had the easy part. I hope I never land up having to answer questions like the question you posed. So bless you all. For those of you who didn't pay, there are dishes to be washed in the background. So, so if you still owe money, don't forget to pay, like me. Thank you very, very much. So bless you all for coming. And I do hope you look out for the next table talk and come and attend it and bring others to enjoy an evening such as this. So thank you so very much. God bless you all.
I have phoned many people, I've messaged many people, and Bill is always one of the first to say, yes, I will facilitate, I will MC, and he wasn't meant to have been here tonight. He accepted at very short notice because the lady who was going to do it for us was unable to. Thank you for always coming forward and always doing such a fabulous job. Thank you.